We're also live on Facebook.
Excellent. Love Facebook.
Brian?
Hey, Brian.
Happy Rona 20, everyone.
Tom, Jeannie, Stephanie, Ann, Ellen, Victoria, Pim.
Does it near does Adam look like he's in like a cult with the
quilt?
The quilt behind him? They're like, I feel like you're in Waco or something.
I've been to Waco. Yeah, that's true.
And you play the guitar now, so you could be, you know.
Wait, Waco like Chip and Joanna Waco, or Waco like ooh Waco?
Like ooh Waco,
Yeah,
like cult Waco.
No, good Waco. I'll say here. I'll do
Here, that's better.
That's
I'll
more.
my uncle's like, yeah.
We'll just wait a few more minutes. Some of us were on a meeting right before this, so I think Shannon probably had to tend to her family briefly.
I did also ask Beth, the middle school principal, to join us.
Oh, okay, great.
I'll make a plug for Sauhegan's graduation tomorrow. You can watch it online via Facebook. And there's also going to be a parade afterwards. So if you'd like to come to the Village Green around 8:15 or so and cheer on the graduates as they get escorted by the Amherst and Mount Vernon police, that would be great. So watch online and then come join us.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes. So tomorrow after the, oh my gosh, Lance, I almost said Wyndham. After the Sauhegan High School graduation, tomorrow, that will be online at 6:30, so you can watch online at 6:30, although you can start watching as early as 6 p.m. There'll be some video we'll be playing leading up to the graduation, and then afterwards there'll be a parade. All the graduates will be led through town, through Amherst, up through the Village Green, where people can be there to cheer them on with signs and congratulate them on their graduation. So that's tomorrow.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, it looks like we have a pretty full house. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So let me just pull up the agenda. So I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:02. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank Shannon for chairing the meeting last month in my absence. I was able to watch it online and read the minutes, and it looks like you guys had a very productive meeting and got a lot done and did a great job setting us up for this month, as well as some of the work that happened with the subcommittee in between. So thank you. So we'll start off by approving the meeting minutes that I know were posted in Slack. Hopefully you all had a chance to take a look at those. So if there aren't any questions, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I motion to approve.
I can't see who that was.
Victoria.
Sorry. Oh, Victoria. Sorry, I only have one monitor. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Stephanie. I can see Stephanie. Any discussion? All those in favor? I guess we'll do roll call. I'll start with Pim.
Yes.
Victoria.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Stephanie.
Yes.
Jeannie. Brian.
Staying, I wasn't there, even though I watched it on TV later.
Thank you. Tom.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
I think that's everybody, and I'm yes. Okay. Motion passes. All right. So next up on the agenda, hold on, I just lost it. Sorry, guys, trying to do too many things at once.
Subcommittee update.
Thank you. Subcommittee update. So I know that the PR committee met, so Why don't we start with that, Shannon?
Sure, yeah. So I just want to thank everyone publicly on the PR committee for being really active and engaged and committed to the work that we're doing and communicating it out. We've had 2 meetings, I believe, since our last meeting. Amy was able to sit in our last meeting, and Anne has joined us as well, so we're really grateful. We've really been spending our time developing the survey for the community. So Lance shared the results of the faculty and staff survey at our last meeting. And now we're moving into the phase where it's time to kind of take the temperature out in the public and find out kind of what our community knows about the needs of our schools and what they think the priority should be. So we worked at our last meeting extensively working through those questions. We have a draft that's in the minutes for the PR subcommittee meeting minutes, which I know those went out to the subcommittee. I'm not sure if they're on the Slack yet. If they're not, we'll make sure they get up there. And our first stop was to push those out to the SAU board and make sure that the board is on board, so to speak, with pushing that out to the community. And anyone who is on that call, if I've missed anything that we need to share with the group, let me know.
Great. So yeah, that did go, did get pushed out to the SA board last night, and I've had a few folks get back to me with feedback. So I'm going to wait till I have a good number of responses, and then I can put those together and share those out to you guys. So.
Awesome. Yeah, and so then our next step will be to begin pushing that out to the community.
Yep. So yeah, thanks. I know you guys have been working diligently, so appreciate all of that. Okay, I would say next up, Michele is on. Yes, I see her. So I believe that there was a request to have her give us an overview of the federal funding, perhaps overview of the state of that, potential for us to capitalize on that, and just some general information on how that all works.
So I think building aid, I think I might have said something incorrectly, but building aid was what she was asked to give out.
Okay.
Which is state federal.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Am I able, I think I am able to share my screen, so I'm going to do that for a minute and just kind of walk you through some information here. The building aid process is a very in-depth process with a lot of steps to it. And so I'm giving you just a high-level summary of what that looks like, and I'll provide some resources for, there's much more information on the state's website. So let me share this. Okay, are you able to see that screen? Yes. Okay. Okay, so first, where we can get information that dives, a deep dive into the building aid process is on the state website, and I provided a link here, and I'm happy to put this information on our Slack channel too, so people can have this as a resource. And then there was also a presentation done by Amy Clark, who works for the Department of Ed and manages this program. And she gave that presentation in October of 2019. So I pulled information from that and as well to provide some background here. So basically, what is building aid? Building aid is a state program that was authorized by RSA 198:5-A quite some time ago. And the process has changed since, but it's funding that comes from the state to assist in new construction or substantial renovation of existing facilities for school for education K through 12. As I said, the building aid process has changed in the past. For a long time, the funding from 1956 through 2009 was managed in a specific manner and really focused on providing funding after the project had been bonded and based on the principal. So the level of funding that was awarded by the state, and there was an approval process and a very detailed methodology for submitting a request, and then the state determining who was going to get funding. But the funding level at the time ranged from 30% to 60% of the principal based on the project. You had to bond the full project, and then the reimbursement was provided after the fact. And the state paid over the life of the debt. Then that program really became unsustainable for the state. And there was an issue with funding it because it gets approved as part of the biennium state budget. And so there was a building moratorium that was put in place in 2010 through 2019. No new projects at that time were eligible for building aid. And they were paying out the tail, if you will, of projects that had been previously approved. So now they have implemented a new process for building aid, and they fund the projects up front. There's a process where, and I have a slide on that walks through the process that we'll get to in a minute. But once the state determines what the award will be for a particular project, they fund 80% of that award up front. So that reduces the bonding requirement for the community and saves dollars all around, if you will. Then the balance of their award is 20% upon completion. That's not meant to say they pay 80% of your cost. It's 80% of the award, whatever is determined that the state will be providing for financial assistance for that particular project. Applications for projects are due, the process starts a full 12 months ahead of the next state biennium budget. So there's quite a lead time on this. And they then take that information based on the applications, and they go through a ranking process and then determine where requests fall in that ranking. So the building aid calculation is based on, and there's a lot of detailed information again in the state's website that identifies what costs are eligible. But the process basically identifies eligible costs of construction and of the project, less ineligible items. So this is how this is determined, less ineligible funding sources. So if we have other state funding, such as the public school infrastructure grant or an energy rebate, something of that nature that's going to reduce the overall cost, that reimbursement is not eligible for building aid. So they're not going to fund something that we are already getting some reimbursement on. Then that determines the eligible cost of the project, and then the eligible cost of the project times the building aid rate that's assigned for our district would determine what the award would be from the state. Currently for Amherst and Souhegan, the reimbursement rate is 30% of eligible cost, but that I think that's only for this current biennium, and I'm not sure if that's etched in stone or could potentially change. So this next document there's a lot of information on here, but it walks through what the current process looks like for applying for state building aid. Start with the local planning phase, and they say they're really starting 1 to 2 years prior with the project. Submitting a letter of intent, and here this is their current biennium process, so a letter of intent by January of this year. Then the application, which is a very detailed application, you need drawings and a maintenance plan, and there's a host of things that are part of that application process, due by July 1st of this year. Then they go through and rank the projects, and publish their ranking. So in this biennium, their ranking will be out January 15th of next year. And then they have the timing where they would say the district would vote on their project. And the reason this is at this stage is that building aid is not retroactive. So if we begin construction prior to approval in a ranking, then that project is not eligible for building aid. And then they go through the rest of the process here with the payment cycle. So that's the current biennium. The next cycle would then be a letter of intent by January 1 of 2020, an application with all the detailed supporting documentation by July 1 of 2022. The state would do their ranking by January 15th of 23. And those are for projects that would be breaking ground in the biennium budget of 23 to 25. And again, as I mentioned, the projects that start construction prior to approval and ranking by the state are not eligible for building aid. So that's sort of a high level summary of what the process looks like currently.
Thank you, Michelle. So I know I think there was some discussion about this at the last meeting. Is that right? Shannon?
No,
No. Okay. Okay.
no. So this is the first dip into
Okay.
to it.
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So questions for Michelle, first off. Tom.
So my question, Michelle, and maybe you don't know the answer, maybe Adam does, we have not applied for anything like this, or we haven't sent a letter to anybody on this just yet. So does this mean that we can't put this on the ballot next year and then break ground next year in theory? Are we automatically looking at 2022 now before we can do anything?
So you can put it on the ballot, but if you begin construction prior to approval and ranking by the state, then you're not eligible for building aid. It is interesting because some of the districts that, when we had this presentation at the New Hampshire Association of School Business Officials, there were some districts that were in the works with respect to building projects. And they felt that the rankings were very heavily weighted, not in their favor. And they were going to, and some of them were moving forward with projects even outside of this process.
Ellen?
I'm just going to pony off Tom's question. So there's no option to have a letter for 21 because it skips a year. And so we've missed our opportunity for that time span.
You would have to have a full application in, so a letter of intent in January and a full application in by July 1st to.
Right, so we've missed the January letter of intent. So I'm assuming if you miss the letter of intent, you don't go through with the application regardless?
Correct.
Just weighing in.
And the application requires, we would have to have a decision as to what the plan is with the building in terms of drawings and are you know.
Yeah, I'm working on an application with another school district, and it should be noted that the application is quite arduous. It does include full schematic design drawings. It includes a full construction estimate. It does include energy analysis being done on your building, and part of that, and some things that the district has to do. The other district I'm working with now is trying to get their application in by July 1. They passed a bond vote last March, and it's a pretty tight time frame to get all of that information together. I am coordinating with the DOE. So in this application cycle, in order to meet that deadline, the project, if you voted in March 2022, would be able to meet an application. So would March 2021. However, you wouldn't be able to break ground on that 21 project for an extra year, which is odd.
it certainly, there was a lot of discussion during the presentation of this at our association meeting, because the timing is really odd, and you're locked in the state biennium cycle, which is not in alignment with the voting cycle for most communities for budgets and bonds.
I saw Jeannie and then Victoria.
Yeah, I just, it's sort of frustrating because it's like they designed this so that nobody could ever qualify. But my question is, and it may be moot at this point, Michele, in the past, the cooperative school district was eligible for more of a percentage of building aid than a non-cooperative school district. Is that no longer the case?
I pulled this from the current posting on the state's website that lists every district and what their current building aid rate is. And it stated that Sauhegan was 30%. But I do recall what you're saying. There was usually a credit, if you will, given to cooperative districts.
Yeah, I think it was 40% versus 30% in the past. But
the other thing that I did want to mention, Lance was talking about the application process being very arduous. One of the other things that needs to be included with the application process is a 20-year maintenance plan on your proposed budget. Sorry, your proposed building. Sorry, my project.
Crazy.
Lance, did you have anything else that you wanted to add since you're in the middle of this process? That
it's right now, the new program is really based on a ranking system. That ranking system, the application is long, and the ranking system is not yet public because the legislature has to act to make that ranking system official. So they're waiting for legislature to get together with the pandemic that's been delayed to put out the ranking system so that you know how to get your points. The old formula, which arrived you at 30%, which was based on how many towns you took in, is less important now because the ranking system involves everything from median household income to how well you're doing in education to your project, the cost per pupil of that project. There is a lot of categories, and I think there's seeing this unfold, Amherst will have the benefit of being able to see where this biennium ranked, so they can suit themselves, they align their projects to say this project would be best suited to receive state funding. I would also note,
I was just gonna say, I thought it also included your percent of free and reduced.
It does. It does. There's a lot of different categories. I think there's like 20 something categories that they're going to rank you on. And they have not determined how they're weighted yet, which is going to be important for Amherst as we align the project. If they, as an example, rank sustainability as one of their top weighted categories, then of course we would want to push sustainability on any project to receive maximum funding. The other thing that I think that's important to note for taxpayers is that right now the state has funded this current biennium as I believe it was a one-time payment into an account. It is not necessarily guaranteed in the next biennium. That is up to the state's budget process again. I don't remember what the current value is. I think it's around a $45 million number that's in an account, but that will be spent in this biennium. The last time, and they can reserve some for the following biennium and carry it in a rotating account, but there is no guarantee in the future that they're going to get the same level of funding from the state or that the funding is even going to be there.
Right.
Thank you, Lance. Victoria was next.
So that was my question. I was wondering if there's a guarantee that this will be included in the next biennium 2 years from now. So thank you for addressing that. While we can't break ground, can we move forward on a project if we were to put it on the ballot? Move forward on the application. It sounds like the application is robust. We would learn a lot about what we were doing, have enough time to fine tooth, go over everything with fine tooth combs, make a lot of decisions. We could do those types of things in the meantime. I'm not sure who I should ask that question to.
Yeah, we can certainly progress with complying with the building aid process to to maximize our possibility of receiving some funding. As Lance pointed out, the dollar amount that's available is based on the state's budget in each biennium. And we don't yet know the rankings, but certainly you could be in the queue. The timing of the construction would have to be part of the conversation, if you wanted to have that opportunity. So you'd have to look at putting something on a ballot and purposefully delaying the breaking ground and construction part.
Okay, can I have a follow-up question?
Sure.
Do we think we should be waiting, like from those people who are on this call, who are the experts in schools and buildings and budgets? Is this something that is a non-starter? We should not be putting it on the budget, or is this something that this group should be debating?
Well, let me comment on that first, and then hopefully other people can chime in too. So building projects traditionally require a lot of communication with the community and don't always pass the first go around. You are hopeful that they do, but there's a lot that goes behind that, and sometimes it takes one or two bites at the apple to get through to that place where you have a project that has been crafted to the point that the community is approving it. So if we wait, then you can see sort of the dilemma that creates, because now you're going to be outside of the next cycle, which is still further out, because it is a biennium cycle. So if you miss the beginning of that process, you're now automatically out 2 years in terms of being eligible for funding. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. From your
Lance, go ahead.
Yeah, adding something to this, as we consider, obviously for a break ground of July 2023, the ideal vote date would be March 2022. If the community was willing to support something in March 2021, delaying it by 1 year, should be noted that there are construction inflation costs. So I think it's weighing how much money do we believe that we'll be eligible for from the state, and is that going to offset the value of construction and the value of the interest rates? Because both of those things combined can have a significant tax impact as it relates to that. Historically, construction rates have risen approximately 7 or 6% a year, 7% in some years, and as low as 5% in other years. We are predicting right now, I think, a 6% increase across this year. A lot of that is based on material costs and the cost of energy. So.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ellen.
So in terms of transparency with the community, we wouldn't know how much we were going to get. So we wouldn't really be able to communicate that. It would be like, a Tuesday morning, everybody wakes up and there's a little bonus. But the project will probably have already been voted on unless we wait till the year after, which would be then 2 years in terms of additional costs for construction.
It's one of the criticisms that the current program has taken is that most districts, in order to be able to complete the application requirements, would have had to have already approved a project and started engineering to get to the point that the application is needed, in which case you are voting before you are finding out if you get money. Like I noted, the applications I'm currently working on with other districts have all passed vote this last year. And if we get funding, we'll let the community know, but we were not able to guarantee anything at the community vote time. Other than.
So
and Lance, we would have to wait off on construction though as well. So we would have to delay construction until we actually heard too.
In the March 2022, we would have to, but that would be roughly about when we're looking to start breaking ground anyways, if we do a traditional design, bid, build process.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Stephanie?
Yeah, the one thing And I remember there was, the taxpayers definitely like to know all the information before they're willing to vote on things. There was I don't know if you remember a few years ago, they wanted to put sidewalks around kind of like around the village area, and there was a chance we were going to get some of the funding back. People wouldn't vote for it because we didn't know if we were going to get the funding back, and there was a big point of contention about that. So I think we want to be careful of how we present this. They might want to wait and know how much we're getting. It's going to be hard to decide whether we hold off or not because the costs increase at the same time, but just keep that in mind that usually the taxpayer wants to hear it all.
Also, another interesting dilemma is that waiting and applying for building aid doesn't guarantee that you're going to be awarded any building aid either.
Mm-hmm. Which was happened with the sidewalk thing, and that's why I got voted down so quickly.
So best case scenario is we go with worst case scenario financially in terms of a vote, and we hopefully wake up one day and get to share with the community, look, we just got a dump of money. I mean, that's really the only way to go about it. Because you can't promise a couple million to the Amherst community and then not show up with it.
Mm-hmm.
That would not be good.
It sounds like that's what Lance was saying that some other districts have done,
Yeah.
is move forward in that way. Seems kind of like the norm.
Right, like you put the full cost on the ballot,
Right.
you go ahead and apply, and then if you get it, great.
Full cost goes on the ballot either way, by the way.
Yeah, right.
That amount,
Right.
so.
But I'm sorry, yeah, but in terms of communicating
Yeah.
with the public.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking that we potentially are going to be having perhaps 2 different projects that will be going out at different times. We have 2 different districts, so perhaps this building aid may fall better in line with what we're thinking for Sohegan 2.0. And I think we should keep that as a possibility as we move forward. For Amherst, I think, I don't know, but I'll go out on a limb and just say it seems that we have missed the deadline for pursuing that if we're looking to put something out this coming next year. So
I want to make a clarification too. I'm looking at the application requirements right now. The 4th application requirement is that you have already put the project out to voter consideration. So this funding program, by application standards, requires you to pass a bond vote before you apply.
okay.
It's not just that you missed a deadline, you have not passed a bond vote. You would have had to have passed a bond vote in March, and you would have had to have, in January, notified the state that you're planning to pass a bond vote to get on the list. So for our timeline, the only timeline for an application process that works to receive building aid would be in January of 2023 or January of 2022.
2022 would have to have the letter of intent.
Letter of intent.
Yeah.
March 2022, we vote. We do the architecture and engineering for the full year and put in the application. And then in July, we would find out if we did receive funding, but we would have already passed the bond vote to let the community know, and then we could break ground. So the way the application works under any district is we're never going to be able to tell the citizens of Amherst, if you vote on this project, we will receive Department of Education funding. It will always be, if you vote on this project, we will apply for Department of Education funding.
Which that used to be a big component of proposals and warrant articles in the past, identifying the potential amount of building aid, but now it seems like it's structured intentionally that you have to, as a community, commit to the project and then subsequent to that, proceed for the possibility of building aid.
Yeah, and Lance, when did you say the criteria was coming out for the ranking?
The criteria was already supposed to be out before final applications are due, but we are the criteria has to be voted on, has to be enacted on by the legislature to accept the criteria ranking. So we are waiting for the legislature to meet at this point.
So, you know, in the past, have things like free and reduced lunch been a high level of criteria, or I'm just wanting to be a realist here in terms of our potential chances.
They have not ranked anything in the past. This is the first pass at this new program. So we will not know. Like I said, this group does not, the current biennium does not know, handing their applications in, how they're going to be ranked if they keep the July 1st deadline. We, Amherst, will have the ability to have seen the rankings will be public then, and we can tailor our application along with every other district to the rankings. You know, to some degree, if as an example, like I said, if sustainability is a particularly high rank, then we need to do a particularly good job on sustainability. Not that we wouldn't anyways, but we want to make sure that's something that we collect all those points. It's a point system. Every question they ask you has points associated with it.
Okay. Well, fair to say we need to move forward as we're going regardless, and maybe wait for additional information to come out and take a look. There's really nothing necessarily for us to do at this moment sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, I do think, because obviously we were all confused as to timing and sequencing and cart before the horse and all that. I do think it's important for us to help tailor that message in a very simplistic way for the community so that everyone knows if we were ever to apply for state funding, the town has to approve the projects first, and only after that's occurred can we apply for that funding. And then being realistic and looking at the community and knowing that they're going to a new system and that it's going to be a point-based system and that there's going to be a ranking involved, and knowing the demographics of how we sit in the state, the likelihood of Amherst getting that funding is probably fairly low, but we will do everything within our power to try to get that funding for the town to reduce our tax burden. I just want to be very transparent to the community that the likelihood is low, so don't be banking on this. We're paying for this, and if we've made the determination that a new school or schools need to be done, we're paying for it.
That's a really good point. And that'll be really important in terms of our messaging. So yeah, thank you. All right. Yeah, quick, Brian, write that down. I agree.
I only can say though, I can't write them.
Send it to the PR committee.
That's okay. It was
This
fun.
is being recorded.
This is recorded.
There you go. Awesome. All right. I'm going to move on if everyone's okay with that. We good? Okay. So next up, we have our update from LaValle Bresinger. So Lance and Ann, take it away.
I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is talk about Amherst Middle School and focus on that tonight. We have a number of questions. What we've done is gone through the existing program. We took a pass at the programming. We've reviewed that. We did some initial meetings with leadership there in special education. And then we did some follow-ups and some program reviews. From that, that's why I've asked Beth to sit in with us. From that, we generated some questions that this group, I think, we'd like you to answer and tackle. So, and what I'll do is I'll send these documents after this meeting. I'll load them to Slack and you can post them. We did develop a better understanding of where how the building is currently being used, more so than just the physical plant. When we reviewed it last time, we looked at similar to what you've done in the past. What is the age of the roofs? Where are problems for the building? Where are, is it, do you have energy issues? Do you have envelope issues? But here we really focused on how is the building being used and how does it work for its function? We've documented that, how these rooms are currently being used. If you look at this floor plan, you'll see that everything in light blue is a general classroom, what we consider, kind of standard education space. Everything in darker blue is specialty education space. So that's music, art, kind of the specials. everything in the orange-ish color, that's special education. Looking across this building, and finally everything in green, that's staff space. If you look at this facility, you'll see that a extraordinary amount of space over the years has been eaten up by all of the special education programming, everything from intervention to various special education programs that you guys are required to run based on your students. This is the first floor. We've also started documenting all the issues they have with each of these rooms. One of the issues many of the issues we shared last meeting were these triangle-shaped rooms that essentially don't have good acoustics, don't have good access to the power, and are problematic from a use standpoint. So we've documented that, and we've put that together kind of into a report that we'll send you. Looking at the upper floor, you can see again, fair amount of special education space. And I will say that special education, they are literally shoehorned into any small room that they can take. An intervention area is created from what used to be a closet. Any small space they can grab, they've used because they have so much need for that in the current student body and the current curriculum. What's left then is education areas for what we call traditional education areas, 6th grade science, 8th grade science. And given that they're kind of taking what's left, you've got a lot of programs that are kind of displaced. So you've got 6th grade here, and you've got 6th grade on the lower floor. You've got 2 7th grade classrooms that fit here. Essentially the building, when it gets to this max capacity level, it starts trying to fit things where they go, not really with a good reasoning to why they should be there. Because it's the only space they have available. So from that understanding, we also went on and looked at how you currently implement that education and what the schedule is. This is the current middle school schedule. I believe this is 20 to 21. Focusing on the kind of the right-hand side, you can see that those light blue areas, that's your kind of core classroom space. You've got special areas that they rotate out of the room to go get. That's everything from Spanish to art to intervention, or innovators and makers. And that gives the students most of their time inside those core classroom areas. I'm going to come back to this in a moment because it is relative, it is important as we look at our program. So as we've noted, we're looking at the population now, and we're looking at where the population peaks. And what we did for the program is we took the peak years and said, let's design to a minimum of that. So for 8th grade, you've got 1 year where in 2022, they're predicting 191 students. And that's what we should program to. So we need to be able to accommodate that in 2022. So we took each peak year, 195 in 2023 in grade 9. You can see that bubble as it moves through, but we said this is kind of the minimum that we need to program against. To size our building for. From there, as we noted, you have a target at the 5th through 8th grade level of 22 kids per classroom. Currently, you're higher than that, but 22 with a 24 max in each classroom. So doing the math on that, what it generates is at the 6th grade level, you really need 8 classrooms. You really need 7.41 and a 95% utilization rate, which essentially says that not every seat is full, to give you some capacity to modify your schedule and to note that you have special conditions that as you create these classes, you need 8 of those. At the 7th and 8th grade level in their peak years, you need 9 classrooms. This is more than you currently have. And it fits oddly into the way education is delivered, which I'm going to move into in a minute. And that's one of the reasons I asked Beth to come today. So just knowing that those peak years, 8 classrooms at 6th grade, 9 at 7th and 8th grade, unless you're willing to go to 25 kids in a room, and then you can go back to 8, 8, and 8. Now, from here, this is the full program, and I apologize, it is a spreadsheet. It's lots of data. I don't expect you guys to make all decisions tonight. I will share this with you. But what we started doing is saying, let's document every room that we need into a list of every program. So For the 6th grade team, we have humanities classrooms, we need 4. What we have is 2 teams of 4. That's the way that 6th grade operates. For the 7th grade team, although they operate in teams of 4, we actually need 9 classrooms. So this is where we get this kind of anomaly, which I'll share with you in a moment. We've also noted that there are some missing areas. Everything you see highlighted in yellow is an area that doesn't currently exist at your building that they would like to have. It includes small, some team meeting areas and collaboration space. It also includes small group breakouts. Now, given you have so much of your building used for intervention, if we created these breakout rooms in each team, then we can kind of put intervention areas throughout the building into each team level and allow students to get their intervention and to meet with special education services, to do their testing, to work in small groups, and kind of create these small size classrooms that can be used for a myriad of things and help with freeing up class space now. Because you don't have these rooms, that's why you're taking classrooms offline to be able to create that space. Now I'm going to go through this pretty quickly and we can come back to any detail. What I did is compared your current area with your proposed area, knowing that you currently have less than 8 classrooms for the 6th grade, less than 9 classrooms for the 7th, less than 9 classrooms for the 8th. We are predicting growth in each of those education areas to meet your demand. Ultimately, across all areas, we're looking at roughly in the education areas about planned growth of about 6,500 square feet. And this is at this building for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade only. This is assuming the 5th grade is removed from this building. In looking at your core areas, we didn't see huge growth in any one area. We saw a myriad of smaller areas like the lack of conference rooms. Special education, administration, guidance all share one small conference room that's way overbooked. That's also the professional development. And we've kind of highlighted those areas throughout. There's other small missing areas like a testing area. And of course, there was the goal that we talked about at the last meeting, which is to create an open learning commons that could be used for a myriad of things for the school. Now, ultimately, you've got about 5,000 square feet of growth in the core area. So not what we would call huge growth. It really is the education, the classroom areas that you're short on. Ultimately, across the building, we are likely looking at a growth of about 14,000 square feet. And I promise I'll stop and take some questions here in a moment. But this is kind of where it gets into the more difficulty. And some people might find this a little easier to understand. So, sorry, just a second. So in reviewing with all the educators, what is the ideal kind of configuration for middle school, the ideal layout? It's these teams. Each of these teams should have the 4 core classrooms. We noted humanities, that's social studies and English. You've got math and science. Right now, they work in groups in teams for each of the grade levels. They've got 4 core classrooms. These are the intervention spaces that would also have a case manager, an office, and a meeting area that they could share and deliver special education out in those teams. The small group coordination, that's that half-size classroom that takes care of all of the intervention that doesn't fit within here. It also takes care of a number of activities and group activities that the teachers are trying to implement in their current curriculum today. They just don't have a spot to put the kids to break into groups. They all should have some restrooms in them, teacher support areas, and some storage out there. What I've done is listed kind of what goes on in each of these areas, and they're all circulating around a central team meeting area that kind of allows you to handle students' needs in kind of a school within a school, a small learning community. So this is kind of the ideal that we described for middle school curriculum as it exists now. It is strikingly similar at many middle schools across the state that are all looking to kind of handle these kids in teams because adolescents have such a consistent need at this level. Now, as we look at a whole building, we've also developed an understanding of how everything works together. So, as I noted, based on those population projections, you need 2 6th grade teams, 2 7th grade teams, 2 8th grade teams. The anomaly is that you also need 2 extra classrooms. And the odd thing is how, the question that I'm posing to this group, which I'll kind of go through different scenarios, is how do we integrate those two teams? And are we building in enough capacity with just those 2 extra classrooms? So one idea is, well, maybe we create a half team. So if you had 2 6th grade teams, 2 7th grade teams, 2 8th grade team, and then 1 half team, which is just 2 rooms and those support spaces, would that work? The principal can speak a little bit more towards this. I'm going to lay out a few options and then kind of get her feedback on that. But the issue I see here is staffing, because now instead of that team having 4 educators, 1 with each subject area expertise, you've got 2 educators. Each educator would need 2 subject area expertise, or you'd have 4 part-time educators running this team. So it becomes a difficulty to staff. Another scenario is maybe we bite the bullet and say, let's create an additional full team. This would give you extra capacity in the future. You'd be able to pick up another 44 kids if the population trended in that direction. In the short term, you wouldn't need this as much. So it is, I think, kind of giving you the most flexibility for the future, but of course it's going to be the most costly because we're going to build the most square footage, knowing that in any scenario your building has to grow. So we considered this and said, well, this could be, in some years a 7th, 8th grade team, and other years, if your population has bubbles like it has now, it could be a 6th, 7th grade team, but essentially this is a team that's a little bit of an anomaly. It's going to be a mixed age group team. And then the final scenario we considered is, well, should we take world languages, which is currently an elective, and integrate those into teams so that every team is actually a 5 subject team? So square footage wise, this is strikingly similar to the last scheme I just showed you, because we're creating 6 classrooms, and world language only had 2 before, so we're creating those 4 extra classrooms in either scenario. The question is, does world language belong with the teams? And if so, then we don't have the issue of the extra teams. And can these groups work in groups of 5 and increase your education in the world languages to solve the need of that population trend that's coming, that's kicking you over the 8-person or 8 classrooms per grade? So I know that was very complex, but kind of simplifying things, here's the questions that this group kind of needs to answer. Are we going to adhere to 22 kids, or are we willing to go to 25 to keep our teams rounding off? If you say 22, how much extra capacity should we build in, or should we just be building in to the peak years in the population trending we did? I said no extra capacity, our peak years were going to be full, but we're hoping not to build too much extra there. And then the 2 follow-up questions are, do we create a half team, a full team, or do we integrate world languages into the team? So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Beth if she's still on and get kind of her take on some of these things and what it would mean to curriculum and students there.
Sure. And I'm hoping you can hear me. My connection has been, Zoom keeps kicking me out tonight. Yeah, so there are pros and cons to each of those situations. I think the first deciding point is just as Lance said, do we adhere to that 22 is our ideal class size, or are we willing to go higher than that? So I think that's decision point 1. I'll speak a little to pros and cons of the teaming model of world language of 2 versus 4, just for your consideration. I also want to note, so currently right now, our 6th grade are in 2-person teams. By going up to 8 classrooms, we could still stick with the 2-person model, or we could have that flexibility to go to the 4 content area model like 7th and 8th grade. So there is that flexibility in what Lance has presented already. In terms of world language, the conversation, I think for quite a while through the district, at least in the 5 years I've been here, has always been, where does world language belong? And And one decision point might be, does world language really belong in elementary, and should it start further down there? That has its own curriculum shifts. If we say, no, we're going to stick with our current model, if we integrate world language into the teams, it would give it the option to be more consistent with what we know as best practice with learning a language, where students would take it every single day. It would have curriculum implications, because right now students cover a year worth of world language across all of middle school, so that they go into high school at the level 2. If you did this, essentially our students would have the opportunity to go into high school at, you know, a level 4. So it has those curriculum implications. The other side of the curriculum implications to putting world language in the core is, while you're gaining greater proficiency or opportunity to gain proficiency in world language, that time would have to come from somewhere. And so it has the potential to reduce our time in our core classes of math, our current core classes of math, science, ELA, and social studies. So those would be kind of the program considerations to work out if we're thinking in the long range curriculum pieces we need to address if world language goes into part of the core. It does essentially add a 5th teacher into those 4-person teams, which does give us space in terms of class size to continue to grow, and it keeps those class sizes smaller. A 2-person team, so a mini team, I would think this would be similar to what the high school has done in the past. We would have to make sure, and I would see that as having to flex across the grade levels. So for example, this year I really needed 2 more teachers in 6th grade because our class size got to 26, 27 per class. Now that bubble is moving up to 7th grade. So that mini team would have to be able to be flexible across grade levels, I would presume, to meet the needs of where class size has the greatest impact. A mini team of 2 would allow us to mitigate class size in a single grade. The challenge would be finding folks, but we do have a lot of teachers who have a K-8 certification, so it's not necessarily as specific as a science certification or a math certification. Although I will say that we're seeing more and more of those content-specific certifications rather than those general elementary ed certifications. So that has a staffing implication for us. If you had a 4-person team, that would allow us in terms of curriculum to flex from year to year again, whether we needed all 4 teachers in that full team in a grade level, or whether it could be a split grade level team and mitigate class size across 2 different grades. Again, if it was a 6, 7, not that the 6th and 7th grade students would mix, they would be in their cohort of their grade, but it would have the opportunity, they would have those shared teachers. I mean, there's a lot of pros to that. Some of the cons is that team experience, and I know the high school has wrestled with these too, is that team experience different than the other 7th grade teams, for example, when it comes to, you know, team level activities, when those teachers are really pulled in 2 different grade levels, those sorts of questions. But in terms, and then when you're flexing teachers across those grade levels, again, they have to be able to be proficient in instruction in multiple grade levels and multiple curriculums. So in that flex model, you lose some of the ability to perhaps go really deeply into your curriculum as a practitioner. Not that the quality would suffer, but in that if one year you're a 7th grade teacher and the next year you're an 8th grade teacher, or you have to learn those 2 content areas, there's a certain amount of time that it would take to get somebody really, really deeply trained and really, really familiar with that curriculum. So those are just some of the kind of the points of consideration. So go. It's a lot to think about. Yeah, it's a lot of information. Victoria, I saw her hand first.
So I'm just going to start us off. Thank you for thinking outside the box. As a parent of a child who is in one of the larger cohorts, I don't think they get, I think there's a reason why as a school board, we've tried to adopt small class sizes. I think it's something that we value. I don't think it's something that should be tossed to the wayside now. in terms of, you know, grabbing an extra classroom or, oh, maybe we just don't need that space. We do need that space. We need it for our regular education for all of our students. So that's where I'm going to start us.
It was either Ellen or Stephanie who was next.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Oh,
I'm her
okay.
mentor, so I'm going to have her go ahead.
Thanks, Ellen. Can anyone remind what the projected growth is of Mount Vernon? Because I know they had a lot of building going on out there with a lot of building permits, which could increase class size over the time, over some period, but I don't know if we have anything on projections on that. So it's something I think we need to consider that may or may not be built into the student model. The other piece, so I know many kids who were in the mini team at the high school the past year, and it's a mix. Some of them feel that they don't get the same experience as those who move around to 4 teachers and have that sort of experience. Some kids absolutely love it because it's a small class. So, you know, depending, I'm sure it'd be tricky for Bethany and her team to put together classes that go into a mini team size, just to consider the definitely student experience is different in that sort of thing. But those are just 2 pieces that I think about.
Thank you. Ellen.
Yeah, so I was going to also talk about the Mount Vernon numbers because I know that hasn't come up. I don't know if Steve Frady's put those into his projections. He very well could have. So maybe Adam can comment on after. So I have a comment sort of about, again, thinking outside the box and the direction we're going strategic vision wise, and to suit the needs of our advanced learners. We have not had a great opportunity to create classes around that. And I think with some additional space, even though year to year it may be utilized differently, and that's going to take a lot of thought, I think it's an opportunity to get ahead of that idea and say we'll have additional space and for multi-age grades. So if you're a 7th grader, but you're doing, you know, 9th grade math, to stay in a 7th grade math class is challenging, right? So there may be some team mixing we can do, which hopefully we're already going to have started at the lower levels in the elementary school. So to continue that on at the middle school, maybe thinking outside the box. So again, we accommodate the space initially, knowing strategic vision wise, that's the direction we're headed, and we're going to need a lot of flexibility. My other comment was there may be years where the numbers are a little lower. We know what's going on real estate wise in Amherst. You know, houses are just flying off the market. And I think as we get deeper into the strategic vision and the word gets out, that's going to continue to happen. So good news for all of us who may eventually leave someday. Not saying I'm going, but you know. But the idea is also that we may be able to create a tuitioning in program for surrounding communities. So there may be a certain number of spots every year, and we may have families start to opt in to some tuitioning in program. I know we have a few of teachers' kids every year, but in terms of flexibility, using our space, I know we've talked about that a little bit at the high school as the numbers have decreased. So that's something to think about as well. And I had one question for Lance. So with the removing the 5th grade and sending them down to Wilkins, how much square footage does that give us at the middle school? And I know those classrooms are just so weird, and we all want to take that little dotted line out of the square, right? As you looked at it, it's like a perfect square with that little dotted line down the middle. So I'm interested to see what square footage we'll gain towards our goal and what you're talking about. I also have to say, and I know this is 22 seems low to me. I think in middle school, we're probably looking at a 23, 24, maybe not 25, but 22 seems low. I think that's essentially our goal, and I think 3rd and 4th grade. So although, you know, ideal, I'm not sure that's something we can really necessarily afford to commit to. So I would throw out some numbers of 23, 24. 25 will probably be the most. That's it.
Thanks, Ellen.
Well, I can weigh in on that response.
Yeah,
if
okay,
that's
go ahead and answer her question.
So removing the 5th grade from this building saves us about 5,500 square feet. That is calculated in, and even with that 5,500 it's factored into this programming. The growth I'm predicting is assuming that's true. If you decided to keep the 5th grade here, you'd have to add 5,500 square feet more space back to this building. And then the question about whether the enrollment numbers predicted or took into account the Mount Vernon, it does take into account Mount Vernon, and you're seeing that Mount Vernon on the prediction enrollment is low in 2020, but then it goes up and stabilizes from 21 to 24 on your current enrollment projections. And it's not huge numbers. It goes from 20 to 29, so an extra 9 kids.
Okay. I saw Shannon's hand up next.
Thanks. I was just going to echo what Ellen said in terms of flexible space. You know, I think having some space to flex into, whether it's for advanced learners or, you know, services is important, and certainly what we're lacking. I also agree with Victoria in terms of the keeping the class size target. I believe, Lance, you were working with the class size targets that were set by the Amherst School Board. Is that correct? Okay, so those are the class size targets that the board has. Okay, yeah. Great.
Yeah,
Support that.
Just on the school board part, 25, it was really 23 to 25, I think was our goal for 6th and 7th.
I was trying to pull it up. I thought it was around what Lance was looking at, not to argue the point, but I just was curious what he was working from.
And I can take that up too.
I'd seen that number, yeah.
Great. So if we can get clarification on that for everybody. So Lance, sorry, Victoria, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say that I wasn't in town when the last middle school project was done, but I feel like I've heard somewhere through the grapevine that when that middle school project was done, they had already kind of filled all of their spaces. And they really maybe should have tried to get a few more classrooms in at that time. And I think a little extra space is going to be good for us versus getting exactly what we need. So that's just my angle. And Jeannie, I don't know if you have any recollection of, you know, of how much space or how quickly we were full at that point, but I think it's worth keeping in mind rather than trying to cut down already from the beginning.
So the classic school building mistake is a town picks a number that they think they can afford. And then they go through the design process and figure out, you know what, we really need a little bit more space, but we can't afford it. So let's make the HVAC systems the cheapest possible systems ever. And let's make everything that we can be the least expensive way to do everything. And then we end up with a building that has poor air circulation, not very energy efficient, doesn't have the right spaces, and requires a heck of a lot of maintenance just to keep it going. So does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I think Adam's warning is something I've also, I think, mentioned, is that, you know, because we don't renovate or build very often, we need to take this opportunity and do it right. And because Amherst is classically guilty of cutting to get things passed, and then you end up with not enough space, and you end up spending more down the road because everything costs more. So I would definitely go with, you know, let's really think about small classrooms, or small classroom sizes, and making sure there's adequate space for growth, no matter how we decide to use it, at least it's there. If it's not there, then we're up the creek. So I have to say too that I valued greatly hearing from Bethany I think it makes such a huge difference to have her be part of this conversation, because obviously she is the expert on not only the education of middle school students, but also on how that building can function in the best way. So, you know, I will defer to her in terms of what is the best way to address this.
Thank you, Jeannie. So, Lance, I'm going to ask you if you could pull up the timeline, if you have that handy. So the reason I want to do that I just want to clarify when we would be needing to answer the questions that you posed, and then I have a suggestion on how to accomplish that, and I can't read that. Go.
I can kind of go through this. So we are looking to create some solutions this summer. I mean, I don't want anyone to get hung up on this week versus that week. I've actually updated the timeline because I believe AMS and CWS are worthy of a meeting each here. I mean, as we've done today, I just can't imagine all of us focusing on AMS and then saying, all right, we're halfway through the meeting. Let's talk about the elementary school. We would like to have solutions, start drawing solutions this summer over the next month. So over the next couple weeks, we would like to have answers to those primary 4 questions.
Okay.
And I understand the group may not be able to make tonight, but those 4 things, and I can send them out of this. You know, are we holding to the school board's suggested numbers, which is a 22 target class size with a 24 upset, 24 limit upset? Do we want to build in for exactly what the population is predicting, or do we want to build in a couple extra rooms? And then I think as far as the middle or the world languages, if we can make that decision at the next committee meeting, you know, have review that, then I can keep working and still hit all of our target deadlines.
Okay.
Now,
So what I'd like to suggest to the group is, you know, we're a relatively large group, and I typically, I hate to form another subcommittee, but I do think that perhaps could be the best way, because there's a lot of information that you presented, and I think there's a lot to consider. And I'd like to ask if Bethany would be willing to work with a smaller subset of our committee to really grapple with all of those issues and think about them thoughtfully, and then come back to the larger group with a recommendation for us. So I'm wondering what folks think about that as an idea, and if yes, if there are some people who would be willing to serve on that subcommittee. I'm thinking perhaps if we're going to have questions for Clark Wilkins to look at also, if we should form a subcommittee for that as well. And then we'll get to Sauhegan. I'm thinking the same thing for Sauhegan for moving forward. So I think we just perhaps will be more productive in a smaller group. So what are folks thinking about that as an idea?
I like that idea. I think it's an efficient way to break it up.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think we can really dig in and get some work done. So Adam, Bethany, you're still on here. So
yep.
Are you willing to work with a few of us to do a deep dive into those questions?
Happy to.
Thank you. And then maybe we can have Anna, Adam also work with a group for Clark Wilkins. And then I have Sauhegan on as well. That will be a little bit different topic, so I'll hold that off for the moment. But
yeah, that's the only caveat I would say is our principals have some other areas of focus right now, and
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So that was why I was asking Lance for the timeline first, because I know that everyone is pretty strapped with the reopening task force and all the other things that I don't even know what you all do. So.
I mean, the long and short of the timeline is if we can make the decision on the middle school at the next meeting and the elementary schools at the following meeting, then we can stay on schedule, and I can have my design team essentially react very quickly as we start to lay the buildings out.
So the next meeting, you're saying our next July meeting, right?
Yes, and in the July meeting, so in
we have a month.
Yep, the next.
Does that work for you, Bethany?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe let's get some volunteers to work with Bethany. Victoria. I see anybody? Anyone else? Brian. Okay.
Amy,
that's great.
Amy, can we consider if I like wanted to work with the Amherst one, but I'm also want to make sure I'm working on the Sohegan one, can we do both?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I'll work with the Amherst one as well.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Is someone taking notes on this? Or I guess it's being recorded. I'm not going to be able to remember. My brain is fried.
Danae is on taking notes.
Oh, good. Thank you, Danae. Okay, and we might as well set up Clark Wilkins now, and since we'll have some extra time, but maybe give them a little bit extra time to work. So I see Ellen for Clark Wilkins. Anyone else for Clark Wilkins? Brian? Great. Thank you.
Hey, Amy, can I make a request just really quickly?
Sure.
While we're on the subject of the middle school, while we've all just seen it, can we kind of get the temperature of this group in particular as to what everybody's kind of leaning towards? I mean, there's been some comments, there's been some consistency.
Yeah.
So that might be helpful. I mean, we don't have their Clark Wilkins in front of us yet, but maybe just for this one tonight.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, feel free to weigh in on your thoughts. I don't know who wants to start. Ellen, since you brought it up.
So I vote for flex space and not cutting it to the core of what we think we need.
I agree completely with Ellen.
Does anybody disagree?
Yep.
That wants to talk about that?
No, I think with the where we are now with the idea of remote learning, and who knows what the rest of this next year is going to look like, when you have kids that may be falling behind, other kids who might be excelling and doing well, we're going to need flexible space, I think, for Bethany to use.
And again, I think strategic vision wise, we need flexible space. It's really important. So can we make a decision tonight?
Middle of the meeting. Huh? Hold on, honey. Trying to run a meeting.
Hold on, hon.
Oh, Adam, maybe you should mute him.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on, hon. We love that. Amy, is there any reason we couldn't make a decision tonight? I guess everybody's consistently kind of feeling that the additional flex space is crucial.
Oh, Bethany's got her hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I had to go run and get my cord to plug my computer in. It was about to. So sorry, you heard me yelling at my husband.
And I'm just going to confirm to further, it is 22. You guys were right. So the goal is 22 to 24 probably for class size for the school board. So yeah, is there any reason that anybody feels we shouldn't make this decision tonight? Do we need to ponder it more?
Can I,
Bethany?
Can I just say that if it's a yay to more space, which would mean those 4 classrooms, the only decision point after that would be, do we need those classrooms incorporated into the teams or not? But by adding those 4 classrooms, in some ways you can delay the conversation about world language, because that is the amount of space I would need to increase world language by if we wanted to put it into the core, or that could be the space, flexible space we need to add another team, either way. So if you say yes to 4, it delays the urgency to choose the world language or not world language option.
I think it probably delays everything, right? In terms of when this actually gets done as well. And we'd probably let you, the experts, determine that. I would vote for keeping that a fluid space and not giving it a label, you know, at the get-go, because strategic vision wise, we don't know necessarily what the children are going to need as they come up from the elementary school in terms of what their experiences have been there. So I just vote for more space. And again, even though I know it's part of a team, it could be used for multi-age, all sorts of other things too.
Yep. And Lance and I would just work through the design of where to put those rooms.
Yeah, I agree with Ellen completely on the, you know, more space, and then, you know, you guys are the experts, and that is really, you know, how to use the space. Like this group is tasked with more of the building piece of it, right? Not necessarily what classes go in which room.
Yeah, and our goal is to create a design that's flexible anyway, so when things change in the future and you need to go from 4-person teams to 5-person or 5 teacher teams, that we should, you know, when we start getting conceptual design, we just kick the tires on all those things. But if this group is on board with it, I mean, we're really only talking about 2 extra classrooms past what you need, getting those integrated, and then making sure we have the ability to put world languages on teams in the future.
Brian.
I would be definitely in favor of more space, because the last I checked, population continues to increase. And since the last time we built a physical building in the town, the population has increased almost 24%. And the Mount Vernon population in that same duration of time has increased almost 40%. And I don't see those numbers going down anytime soon, looking at all the new housing builds that are on both the Mount Vernon and Amherst dockets. And we've had cresting issues in the past where Sauhegan clearly hit its max, which created the need for the annex. And we still have never addressed the other buildings with significant expansions. So anything we do that doesn't create increased space, we are once again kicking the can down the road. So we're going to spend the money at some point in time, or we're just not going to have a sound educational infrastructure in town, which is going to drive property value down. So pick and choose when you're going to get your money.
Well, good points.
And I did not write that down. Sorry.
You're being recorded.
Okay, so I stepped away for a moment. It sounded like you guys were, are we thinking that we don't need a subcommittee, or because all of the questions are answered? Or Lance, can you just refresh on that so we can move forward?
It sounds like a subcommittee is not needed, and
You're off the hook.
you'd like me to work with Bethany to make sure that the design accommodates the flexibility of having the extra 2 classrooms and the flexibility of being able to put the world languages on the teams in the future. So
Okay.
I can work with that assumption and work closely with Bethany and Adam to start looking at conceptual designs to show this group.
Great. Done? Everyone good with that?
Yes.
Excellent.
Very exciting.
Yes. Yeah, I have to admit, I was pretty excited looking at those drawings. So it'd be great to have that realized. So Clark Wilkins, though, we probably still need a subcommittee, do you think, Lance, to advise?
Wait till
or
next. I will plan to
wanna wait?
present. I will plan to present Clark Wilkins at the next meeting in the same fashion.
Okay.
I don't know as if I'm going to have the same questions. Elementary schools tend to be a little more straightforward.
Mhm.
So let me get into that and let me review that with Clark Wilkins' leadership, so that we will be ready for next session. And what I'll do is I'll do the same exercise with Clark Wilkins. If there are questions posed, I'll pose those at the next meeting. And I should be able to give you an update as to the conceptual design at Amherst Middle School. As you can see, I'm kind of accelerating the middle school in front of Clark Wilkins a little bit, but at least it gives us something to look at besides just spreadsheets in one meeting.
That's great. Appreciate it. Okay, good. I'm going to move us along because I think everyone is probably losing steam like me.
Jeannie has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you, Lance, when looking at the plan for the middle school, you didn't really talk much about the, I don't even know what it's called. Is it core facilities, meaning gymnasium, cafeteria, that kind of thing? Are those going to be expanded? You just didn't mention anything, and I just wanted to sort of find out more about that.
Yes, so there are a few missing rooms in what we would call core space. So core space would include the administration. So we have a few missing conference rooms, the administration. We have some missing testing rooms that are, not really part of the education areas that are more core areas. We did note that the biggest growth in the core is the ability to have what we discussed at the last meeting, which was that kind of open commons area. It's a whole school commons area. So the big central core area, similar to what we're creating at Sauhegan. So your growth in your core areas is about 5,000 square feet predicted. Each of your spaces, like your gymnasium doesn't need to grow. Your library is actually adequately sized as it is. It just needs to be reconfigured, but it may find a different home somewhere else in the building to allow that open commons to kind of take place.
So we are currently conducting a lot of things in a gym / cafeteria, right? And am I right
Yes,
about that? So
you are.
So are we going to have separate cafeteria, separate gym in this new plan?
At the middle school, we do.
At the middle school?
But one of the things that we discussed with the leadership team was having what they call a smart lunch, which would alleviate that dual use. Smart lunch allows for students to have lunch either at the cafeteria or in different areas, like the library or their team home. That frees up the cafeteria's schedule a little bit, and its size a little bit, alleviates some of that. We felt that we could accommodate that with that shift, rather than build in a larger cafeteria or try to separate out cafeteria from performing arts. Also with music, we're trying to get them adequately sized rooms to be able to practice music in their spaces versus having to go to the stage to do any kind of rehearsal. So we're attacking that in a number of ways without putting in a lot of planned growth for that particular space.
Okay, and have you taken into consideration the needs of the community for improved gym space in the middle school? Because I've heard that for years, that we just don't have enough space for, basketball to happen in, the facilities that we currently have.
I have not at this time taken in community. If you wanted a second gym, your physical education does not require a second gym. If your community demands a second gym, then that has not been taken into consideration. It is something we can look at when we look at Clark Wilkins' solution, because no matter what, I think we're going to be talking about major reconstruction of a facility there, and it may be that it's most cost effective to do it at that facility, particularly if it ends up on this site, which I'm pretty confident it's going to, given that one site is just so small to be able to take a building.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. So I feel like we have a really good plan set up for next steps for Clark Wilkins. We know where we're at. We have a good plan for the middle school. So I just wanted to briefly talk about Sauhegan 2.0. I know that you guys did a deep dive into that at the last meeting, which was great. So I have a suggestion. I think that, Sauhegan 2.0 is really big. There's a lot in there. And my view, and we can certainly talk about it, and I know that we have talked a little bit about it, is that perhaps we need to take a look and prioritize what needs to be done there, and develop a long-term plan. We are going to get to a point where we're going to have to prioritize what we're going to be asking the taxpayer to fund, and when and why and how and all of that. So in the meantime, I would suggest that you guys nix my middle school committee, but I think we need a Sauhegan 2.0 subcommittee to work with Michele and Adam to really take a look at prioritizing those projects and developing a very long range plan on how to roll that out, and then take that information and how does that roll up into our plans that we will be finalizing hopefully towards the end of the summer for Clark Wilkins and AMS. So there's lots of pieces to the puzzle to put together, and I think there's simultaneous tracks, and I feel like we're in a good space moving forward with the elementary schools, and I wanted us to take a look at Sauhegan in conjunction with Adam and Michele. So wondering people's thoughts on that, and if people think that's a good idea, if there are folks who would volunteer to work with them this summer on that project.
I think that's a great idea, Amy. Sauhegan 2.0 has a lot of moving parts in it. There's just no way we can really dive into it, in this monthly meeting. And I would nominate everyone who, signed up for the middle school committee that is no longer needed.
I want to be
help out this summer. I have good availability this summer to do these Zoom meetings.
I'm on it. I'd like to be on that.
And
Great.
I'm gonna, just so you know, Lisa Eastland just volunteered as a community
Yeah, I see
member.
that. Thank you, Lisa. That would be great. Okay, good. And then, so we have Victoria, Lisa, Stephanie, great. Okay, good. Perfect. Okay, so I will leave it to you guys to get yourselves set up and do that work and report back to the committee.
Victoria, would you be willing to coordinate the meeting in terms of setting a date?
Sure, I would love to coordinate the meetings and set the dates.
All right, and really quickly, I forgot to have Shannon put this on the agenda, but we just get a super quick update on unassigned fund balance, because I know those decisions were made between our last meeting and now at the board meetings. So I'm going to put Pim and Ellen on the spot quickly
I'll go first, Pam.
Yeah.
So at our meeting, we went through a number of items, and I think as many people know, because I'm sure you all watched it, we had a number of items and a good amount of money as well. What we decided in the end was to allow Adam, Michele, the administration to essentially take care of the items we had approved, and then we gave an additional budget up to $400,000. There were lockers and assorted things that we didn't have all of our answers to, and so we kind of put a cap of $400,000 on the expenditures.
My turn? All right, look at my notes. So we had our unreserved fund balance was $291,000. I think we decided that we were going to go up to around 270,000, allow the expenditure up to that point. And we're staying away from Sauhegan 2.0 projects, aka science classroom upgrades, and really concentrating on our systems, HVAC systems within the annex, as well as some security features, and like some locker room upgrades, I believe. So it was, we said both to Adam and Michele that they could prioritize those projects based on that money and see how far it would get them.
Great. Thanks, Pim. Any questions for them? Okay. So yeah, last thing, Adam, Shannon, and I are going to be visiting the Board of Selectmen on Monday. We are on the agenda, and we are going to pretty much be doing our presentation that we gave to the last SAU board meeting, really outlining the charge of this committee, why we were formed, how we were formed, and the status of where we are currently and where we're moving forward. So we will be presenting to them, and we thought it was a good idea, since we're going to be pushing out our community survey, to get some input from the Board of Selectmen on this whole project, get their feedback, get their thoughts, and let them know that we are going to be engaging in the community on this important project around our facilities in the schools. So we're excited to do that, and we'll certainly be reporting back to all of you at the next meeting. And I think that wraps it up for tonight. I think we have our plan for our next meeting, and I think we got a lot done tonight. So, and as always, if there's anything in between that you want to communicate to either Shannon or myself, please feel free.
I just have a quick question. Shannon, do we have
Sure.
a subcommittee PR meeting scheduled?
We don't. I'll get
Okay.
that set. We don't.
All right,
have-
great. Thank you.
Yeah. I was kind of waiting to get some feedback on the survey before we.
It's good. Survey's good.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you guys. I know it's a lot of work, and I really appreciate everybody and all of your time and commitment.
I just have one quick thing to share with, mostly for Lance, but just for everyone on the committee. And I mentioned this already to Adam and Amy, but when you're looking at Clark Wilkins, it was brought to my attention this week that the upper field was built using a grant from the state of New Hampshire Land Water Conservation Fund. So we have to build another field if we do anything up there. So just to put that in the plan.
Yeah, good to know. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Amy.
Have a great night.
Good night.